Welcome to Cash Flow Savannah, episode 11. I am here with my co-host, Chandler Newman. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. Running around in this heat in Savannah, Georgia. It's getting pretty hot.
It is hot. It is August. It is 2023, and it is hot. Our episode today is brought to you by Team 912, which happens to be an offshoot of Sid Was Here. And Team 912 is based in Savannah, and it is an all real estate investor team of agents. So we know what you're going through because we've been through it first. Chandler, what did you think of our guest today? We had an amazing celebrity guest on our podcast.
Yeah, it's funny. I was super excited about this one. I listened to Craig a few years back, and he is just so good for younger investors that kind of don't have that much money.
Mm.
And so when I listened to him a few years back, it really stuck with me because like that's the perfect strategy to get started. And yeah, he kind of grew from that, and we had some really good questions to ask him today.
Yep. Today's guest is Craig Curlop. He really worked hard for his first rental, second rental, third rental. When you hear what he went through to get it, you're going to stay, there is no excuse for me. Like, I have a lot more than that, or I have a lot more capability. That's what I kept saying is like, you can't make excuses that you're not buying real estate. Like, this guy just figured it out and he sacrificed. I think that was one of the biggest things.
He sacrificed some comfort for he's very comfortable now in the long run. So
That's true. And I wonder, I forgot to ask him, but I wonder what kind of kind of negative feedback he got because he was really doing things very differently. This was before real estate investing was a thing. So if you're really trying to find your first deal, if you're really struggling, to feel like you can afford your first deal, this is really the episode for you. This guy didn't have a lot of resources, but just very creatively figured out a way to buy real estate and to keep buying real estate.
yeah, absolutely. You couldn't have said it any better.
Well, with no further ado, we present to you Craig Curlop. Welcome, Craig Curlop, to Cash Flow Savannah. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, so glad to be here. I feel like this has been a long time coming. I'm honored to finally get the invite.
Absolutely.
For spending some time with us.
For sure.
Well, Craig, you've really made your name in the real estate investor community with house hacking. And I definitely have quite a few clients on the real estate purchasing side that are going to house hack. And I know there are many more in the pipeline. We also have owners that do this where they'll buy a place in Savannah, they'll furnish it, they'll use it a few months a year, and then Sid Was Here manages it when they're not here. So Chandler and I are very familiar with the concept, but you are the pro. You actually wrote the book for Bigger Pockets on house hacking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And so you want me to go into a little bit about what that's all about?
Absolutely. How'd you get started and where are you now with it? Are you still doing it?
For sure. Yeah. So I got started back in 2017. And basically because I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast and I think the Bigger Pockets podcast still mentions in almost every episode that house hacking is the obvious way for anybody who's just starting out to get started. And so for those listening that may not know what house hacking is, it's the idea that you're going to buy a 1 to 4 unit property with a low percent down. And by low, I mean it could be 1%, 3%, 5%. And if you're a veteran, maybe even 0% down. And you live in one of those units or one of those bedrooms if it's a single family home. Then you rent out the other bedrooms or the other units. So then the rent from those other units covers your mortgage or at least subsidizes your mortgage, and you can live pretty dang close to free, eliminating what likely is your largest expense while also being able to pay down a loan, have an asset that's appreciating year over year. You're going to save a lot in taxes. And because you can just buy this with 3% down, you have to live there for 1 year. That's one of the loan stipulations. And you can do this year over year over year. And so if you're, younger looking into this in your early 20s or so, you could do this for 5 or 6 years. And by the time you're 30, I wouldn't be surprised if you have yourself 7 or 8 properties, a multi-million-dollar net worth, tens of thousands of dollars of cash flow. And, you're basically able to retire, I think, fairly consistently. Like anybody can do this if they can just be consistent with the house hacking strategy.
So I want to ask about, do you look for a certain amount of cash flow when you're doing this, or are you kind of like, oh, if I'm not cash flowing, it's all right? How do you go about that?
So these days it's okay if you don't cash flow. It's very hard to cash flow, at least in a lot of the markets these days, especially while living there, because rates are up, prices have been up. It's been tougher to make things work. There's no doubt about it. But I will say this is that in 2017, when I bought my first property, everybody was shouting that it was the top of the market. And the story there was that prices were back at 2008 levels, and they couldn't go any higher than 2008 for some reason. I thought that was a bunch of baloney, and clearly I was right. And so I continued to buy. But what people were telling me really scared me, especially as a first time buyer and people with more experience than I had. And so, the moral of the story is that now is always going to be the best time. I mean, 20 years ago was always the best time to buy, and the next best time is now. And so in 3 years from today, we're recording this in 2023. In 2026, people are going to be wishing they bought in 2023. And so just buy now, and then 2026, you'll be happy, versus wishing you bought in 2020 when it's 2023 now. So that's my soapbox.
That's such a good point. You talk about the market today. Do you see it kind of staying where it is? Going up, going back down? What you think?
I don't think the market is going to come down significantly. I think when everyone right now seems to be waiting on the sideline for interest rates to drop, because I think they believe that once interest rates drop, magically the prices are going to drop. But what's going to happen is the prices are going, or the monthly payment is going to drop. The monthly payment is going to stay the same, and prices are going to go up. And so that's why I think now is actually one of the best times to buy, is because buyers are scared. So there's the least competition that I've ever seen in the market. And I'm a real estate agent, so I'm very much up to date with the market. And yeah, so it's like the best time for buyers. There's we can put offers in, get it at asking, we can have our way with inspections and appraisal. It's just it's a nice time to negotiate as a buyer. And yeah, you got this higher interest rate, but again, in just a couple of years or whatever, you can refinance it. And now, you're sitting pretty with maybe $200,000 of equity. And now you've got the lower monthly payment that you were wanting for in the beginning.
Okay.
I love that. Make it work today, and it's going to be even better a few years from now. Everything I've ever purchased is always better a few years, no matter what the interest rates are doing. Rent's going to be higher. Your valuation is most likely going to also be higher. So tell us about your very first house hack, Craig. And did you move every year and a half for a while? Like how did you tell us how you built your personal portfolio? Because I know I have a lot of clients trying to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, so I did most of this in Denver, and so I moved to Denver in 2017. Started working at Bigger Pockets, bought my first house hack a month or so later. And at the time, there was all these different types of house hacks didn't exist, right? No one was talking about Airbnb. No one was talking about rent by the room. No one was talking about any of this. It was you buy a duplex, you live in one half, and you rent out the other. And so I bought a duplex. I lived in the bottom unit, and I rented out the top unit. And I bought this duplex for $385,000. I used an FHA loan, put 17 or so grand down, and my monthly payment was like 2,200 or so, and I was making 1,750 from the top, and I was living in the bottom, and I was pretty what's the word? I really really wanted to live rent free, and so what I did was I put my bedroom on Airbnb, and I lived out in the living room, right behind a curtain and a cardboard box room divider kind of thing. And that's kind of where I got my story. But then I was making $1,100 a month off of my bedroom, plus the $1,750 from the upstairs. And so now I'm making $2,850 on a $2,200 mortgage. And so I'm making about $600 over the mortgage, plus living for free. And I mean, it wasn't that bad, right? But mind you, right, I was 24 at the time. I was young, I was single, and I was just kind of like, hey, if there's a time where I'm going to make sacrifices, it's going to be right now. And so that's kind of what I saw. I was just looking, I had all these quotes in my head of, live like no one else now, so I can live like no one else later. And then what's the David, not the Kiyosaki, Robert Kiyosaki, don't ask something about how can, don't say I can't, or how I can't afford it, but how can I afford it? Or don't say I can't, say how can I? So don't say I can't cash flow. How can I cash flow? And so I was kind of just saying all these quotes inside my head, and just figuring out okay, well, if I Airbnb this, I'll cash flow it that way, right? And then you get creative, and that's how you cash flow in an expensive market, and you can do that year over year over year.
That's awesome. When the pressure's on, you find a way to cash flow.
That's right. That's right. And then I can talk a little bit too about, Julie, you asked about how I continued to scale. And so I got smarter, right? As I do, note that like your first house hack is going to probably be your worst one because
Yeah.
you just don't know what you don't know. And then I got smarter every time. And so my second one, I was like, oh, I could do this, but with a single family home and I could rent it by the room. And so I can I went and bought a house about 10 minutes north of Denver in a town called Thornton. And it's a 5-bed, 2-bath house. I bought it for 343,000, put 5% down. So maybe about 20 grand, maybe put 10 into it. And so I had a 5-bedroom, 2-bath house. And my mortgage payment on that was like 2,300 or so. Interest rates were actually a little bit higher at that time. And I was renting out each bedroom for like $700. And so I was making $2,800, $3,000 a month while living rent free in this other bedroom with, it was a normal room with a wall and doors and a bed and all that. And yeah, and so I was cash flowing while living there. And then I moved out and rented out my own bedroom. And then I got even smarter and I found houses that have split levels, right? I'm not sure what the Savannah market's like. But in Denver, there's a lot of basements. And so, you could basically have the layouts such that you could split the top from the bottom unit and rent it out as 2 separate units. So I'd Airbnb one unit, do rent by the room on the top. And, my mortgage payment on that third house was right around $2,000 and I was making like $3,700 a month. And so, you get smarter and smarter as you go. And I'll let you guys jump in there. I feel like I went for a while there.
You're good. You're good. I
No,
want to
that's
ask.
great.
I want to
Yeah.
step back and ask. So in between, you had 17,000 for your first house. In between, and you said you weren't cash flowing too much on your first house. What were you doing to get that next mortgage payment? Like you going to the bank saying, "Hey, I'm making this much on the house," or did you just save enough to get a traditional loan? Like, how did you go about that?
So that was my FHA loan. I just saved up. Yeah, I mean I was cash flowing, what would I say, like let's just say 500 a month.
Mhm.
So that's 6,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not enough, right? But I was also not paying rent, right? So there's another $1,000 a month from what I was saving before. So that's $1,500 a month. And then also I was still saving from my job. I was working at Bigger Pockets at the time. I was making, I don't know, 65 grand a year with like a very small, like a 10% bonus. So let's just say 70 grand a year. And I was probably saving about $2,000 a month off that. And so, 2,000 plus 1,500 plus 500 was $4,000 a month. That's $48,000 a year. That's enough to put 5% down on a $350,000 house.
Okay. So then I kind of want to jump forward now. Now you have 2 houses making let's say 70 grand a year. How do you get that third one? Are the banks kind of like, "Hey, we'll jump all
Oh,
over"?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so the way you need to have long-term leases in place. And so I had, all my leases were long-term leases. When I moved out of my duplex, I ended up putting them both as long-term leases. And so those leases covered my mortgage payment. Then the 5 leases in the other house covered my mortgage payment for the other house. So then all I had to do was qualify for the third house with my job.
Okay. That makes sense. So you didn't have to restructure those loans at all. They just went off the leases and were like, "All
No,
right." Yeah.
So you only
yep,
had
they went off the
one
leases.
FHA loan. Of the 3, you just did one FHA.
I've only ever done one FHA loan.
Couldn't you? I could get this wrong. You understand? I've never done this, but couldn't you get a new FHA loan every couple of years because you're moving your primary residence? No. How does that
You have
work?
to refinance your initial FHA loan. You can only have one out at a
Oh.
time. And so I
Oh.
did refinance my FHA loan out, actually. I did do that. But I just haven't because FHA is the only loan product where you can buy a duplex, triplex, or quad for 3.5% down. I
Mhm.
figured, why would I waste that on a single family when I can get a 5% conventional on a single family home? So I'm happy paying that extra 1.5% on the single family so that I can keep the FHA so that in the event a triplex comes up, I can go ahead and buy that with 3.5% down.
Were these duplexes, triplexes that you were buying like move-in ready, fixer uppers? Did you do some work to them? Or?
The first one was brand new, move-in ready, flipped. The second one, I put 10,000 into it, and that really was just adding a bedroom and just some electrical stuff, and just some other minor stuff.
Okay.
So it kind of just added up. And then the third one, I probably put about 20 or 30 grand into, and that is where the third one had a kitchen in the downstairs. And so I updated the kitchen. It looked horrible. Updated the whole downstairs and turned that onto Airbnb. And so I probably spent about 20 to 30 grand down there. And so pretty much every time that I house hacked, it kind of got like a little bit more and more of a project because I kind of had more money and I was like, oh, there's some sweat equity here, and I
Yeah.
want to make this thing good. So that's basically what I did. Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. And I appreciate you saying, and I agree, I'm the same way. The first rental I ever bought was not a great deal, but now I look like a genius. And I deal with buyers every day and they want the numbers to be perfect. And a lot of times they're just not going to be, the day you buy it. But as time goes on, it turns out very well. But like you said, if you're getting a very low down payment, you're able to house hack it. It doesn't have to be as much of this killer deal in that you're getting it with very low money down. You're learning a ton. That learning curve is so valuable.
Totally. Yeah. And on that, just to kind of like, come to full circle with that first house is, again, it was 6 years ago, right? And so in that time, and I refinanced out of the FHA loan, so I took off the PMI. So now my monthly payment on that is like 1,900. My monthly rent is probably 3,100 or 3,200. So I'm making over $1,000 over the mortgage on a long-term rental, and it's in a part of Denver that is high appreciating. I got it appraised almost exactly a year ago. Actually, it was like August of 2022. So 5 years after the purchase, and it appraised at $800,000, right? And so this property has literally given me over probably close to $500,000 of net worth just by this one purchase that I made because I had to live behind a curtain for a year. And so, people ask me like, would you live behind a curtain for a year for 500 grand? I think most people would say yes for that. Yes to that. At least most people that weren't already super wealthy. And so, yeah. So yeah, I said yes to that.
I think I would too.
Yeah.
With the in such a competitive market, what are some strategies that you're using to find deals? Is it all MLS? Or are you going off market?
Most of the deals that I have done have been on the MLS. There's been a handful that have not been, but most on the MLS. And so usually, especially this is why it's extremely important to be with an investor real estate agent who knows what they're doing and knows their market, is that we can go into a house on the MLS, see things that other people can't see, and learn how to creatively make that deal work and cash flow for you. And so in Denver, like in a lot of the markets that we're in, again, it's like those split units, or it's the rent by the room, or it's, I've got a buddy that one thing that I love doing that I'm going to start doing again is kind of like, I don't want to call them halfway houses, but they're like rehab houses. And so you've got someone that runs this rehab house. You can put 2 to 4 beds in each bedroom, and you can charge like $600-700 a bed. And so if you think about that, if you've got like 5 bedrooms and you've got 2 to 4 people in each room, let's just say you got 2 people in each room, you've got 10 people paying $700. That's $7,000 a month, right? And the house was I probably bought it for 400,000. Right, I'm almost getting the 2% rule in a high appreciating market in these days. Like 2% rule doesn't happen these days, right? And so that is another strategy too that you could potentially do if you're in a market and you're having trouble trying to cash flow.
I love how creative you get with these. It's not just, oh, it rents for 1,500. You find really creative deals with it. So it's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Smart.
Yeah.
With houses on the MLS, I know in Savannah, super competitive market. Anything that has any sort of ADU, duplex, triplex, quad, offers are just coming in like crazy. How do you compete with all those offers? What are some strategies that you use?
So the cool thing about being a house hack, there's nothing that's like I've got the silver lining bullet thing that no one's ever thought of. You have to kind of just think through the strategy of your house hacking. You're able to pay more than the average person, and it doesn't matter, right? How much you buy this house for. If you've got a triplex that's going for, I don't know, 300, 400,000, say, does it really matter if you pay 410 or 450 for it? No, in 10 years, the thing's gonna be worth 800,000. You're not going to remember how much you paid for it,
Yeah.
right? Or it's not going to matter, right? You think when I was I bought my first property at 385, right? It was listed at 400 and I got it down to 385. And I was nickeling and diming these guys. I was like trying to get at 360 and it was so stupid because it like, would my life be changed at all if I bought it at 400 and now it's worth 800? No, like, right. Maybe I'm 100, like $75 more poor, right? Like it's probably a $75 a month difference. It's not a huge deal, but like, so get over the like, oh, I need to get the best deal at the best time, and that's how you're going to make the most money. It's like, no, you're going to make the most money. You're going to actually change your life and actually become wealthy by just doing a deal every year on the year. And I did a deal. You could look at all of my history. It's like June, July, or August of every single year, right? Is exactly when I bought a house for 6 years. And actually on the 6th year we moved, so I bought one after 6 months. And so it's just kind of nuts when you think about and actually it's crazy enough too is like, yeah, I moved every year, but I actually moved every 6 months because halfway through that journey I met my now wife and she started house hacking and we were living together. And so now every 6 months we were moving. And it was just a lifestyle for a couple of years, but it's given us now a lifetime of reward. So
You knew she was a keeper when she started doing that with you. That says a lot. I mean, I love that. She's a hustler too, it sounds like.
oh yeah, oh for sure, yeah. She saw the light of financial independence and she wanted to make sure to get that for sure.
Great. Craig, what's more important to you when let's say you were still, I understand you're probably not now, but if you were still house hacking and you're wanting to keep moving every year, getting a new property, what's more important to you? The sales price, the price per bedroom, the down payment, the APR? What would you say is the number one thing that you have to have correct?
Depending on the strategy you want to do, I really liked the amount of bedrooms to the price.
Okay.
Because the more bedrooms, the more rent relative to the price, the more cash flow, and then obviously appreciation would just do its thing. That would always be what I'd look for. But again, like I wish I could tell you that I was like this savant and I was like behind my spreadsheet and like calculating all these numbers. Like it was literally like, oh, that's a 6-bed, 3-bath in that area. I'm in. That was it. Like that was my extent of the numbers. I didn't call any insurance companies before. I didn't go and look at the utility bill history. I didn't do any of that. I was like, I just know that if I continue to buy real estate, I'm going to be better. And it worked out.
Really?
You're saying that because I am always say I can smell a deal and then I run the numbers later, but I can smell it.
Yep.
As soon as I see it, I'm like, and then I'd make sure, obviously. But anyway, go ahead, Chandler. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, no analysis paralysis. I know even me, I can get caught up in, oh, I got to run numbers and blah, blah, blah. And then like I'll let, kind of like you were saying earlier, a $5 difference just screw the whole deal. And
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like, I've run numbers, I guess, on enough deals where like, I just know, like, I know what the mortgage payment's going to be. I know what the rents are going to be. And so if I can just get the rents above the mortgage a certain amount, at the time it was probably $1,000, but now it would probably be closer to 500. I would be like, yeah, all right, it's a deal. Like I'm down. Like I know that there's some left over for the capex and the maintenance and all that, but like I don't know when the furnace is going to go. No one's going to know. I don't know when the roof is going to go. And so you just kind of look at, okay, how old's the roof, how old's the furnace? In the inspection, you're going to get all that information. And then you negotiate with the seller, hey, can you please replace the furnace? Or hey, give me a $3,000 credit so I can replace the furnace when this thing blows in October when it starts to get cold, right? Because it always goes on the first cold day. I don't know if you guys have experienced. Oh, you guys are living in Savannah. Maybe it doesn't get it gets colder there though, right? Yeah.
That's how air conditioners go.
That's how air conditioners go. Yeah, it's always like the first day, and you're like, huh? Yeah. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
so it sounds like your favorite strategy is rent by the bedroom, right?
Yeah, it was as I was going through the house hacking. Yep.
Okay. Do you have a different strategy now, or what are some other strategies you use?
Yeah, so rent by the bedroom is really good because I think it's recession proof. Because ultimately in a recession, people are going to want to save on rent, and so there's going to be more people applying for bedrooms. Now it is quite management intensive, so that's why I decided to switch out of that after a few years. Like my whole thesis is buy a property property, get as much cash flow as you can for the first couple of years when it's not cash flowing great. And then when rents raise, or in this environment, when interest rates decrease and you can refinance, then, and maybe you're making more money in your career, you can then take less cash flow in your houses, but then make it easier and get some of your time back. And so that's basically what I did. So now my first two are long-term. And then my second two in Denver are what's called Airbnb arbitrage. Have you guys heard of that strategy?
Yep. Can you
Yeah.
tell
So
a little bit about it?
yeah. So this is like literally my favorite strategy to do. I love this. And I rent the property on a long-term lease to somebody who I then allow to Airbnb. And so she is paying me probably like 10 or 15% more on rent. Plus she's saving me a property management fee of about 10%. So I'm netting about 25% higher on an extremely passive thing. And all I have to do is say yes to letting her Airbnb my place. And then she keeps the difference. And I don't know what that difference is. And I don't really care. I think she makes over $1,000 a month on each one of my properties. And I'm like, good. I hope you make 2,000, 3,000. Like it could be a 10,000. I want her to keep my property because I'm so happy with right now. She pays me for the 2 units in the one house. She pays me $5,200 a month. My mortgage payment is about $2,000. So I'm making like $3,000 over the mortgage passively on this house. Please go make your 10 grand. Like that is worth everything to me. So, yeah, that's my thing. That's what I love. I love doing that.
I've always known about the arbitrage, but I didn't think about it as an owner's perspective, that it's basically passive.
Yeah, no one thinks about it from the owner's perspective, and they're always like, "Oh, the owners are going to say no." I'm like, if the owners have half of a brain and are just like a little bit of open to something different, it just makes so much sense. Like people aren't staying there. They're not staying there long. Like the people that do damage to houses and get mold are the people that forget to turn the exhaust fan on when they're taking a shower, right? They don't want to open the window because it's cold outside. But when you got a cleaner in there every couple of days, cleaning it, opening it, airing it out, watching it over for you, and people are like not coming to Denver to stay in my place. Like my place is not like luxury. Okay. They're going to Denver because they want to be in Denver. So they're not even going to be there. Right. They're not going to use my appliances. They're not going to use any of my stuff. They're just going there to sleep in the bed. And so, it's like, I think that's the go-to thing now.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. Go ahead, Julie.
I was just saying that's really smart. I love it.
That's one of the reasons I like Airbnb a lot, is because you get somebody in there every couple of days to clean it, and it really just, you can take care of it way better than a long-term tenant.
Yeah, the tenant, the person renting from you or the owner, they have to keep the property up to keep it making money. So that's very smart. Very, very smart. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Craig, but house hacking was a big deal for me as I was amping up my investment career. I have this, if anyone's interested, I have a presentation on sidwashere.com/media, and it's called How to Cash Flow on Your Cat. And I'm really convinced that everyone has something in their life that they can cash flow on. And I kept running out of the down payments. When I was buying properties, it got harder and harder and harder to come up with those down payments. It's expensive. And I know you're probably in the same spot. But once I started house hacking and I started renting out my pool house, did I love it? No, I kind of like not having people back there. But at the same time, all of a sudden, like you said, I was able to buy bigger and projects and more quickly, and I could come up with the down payments. And it was amazing how much that extra money came in handy on an asset that I already had, so, and you had to live somewhere. So you literally took an asset that you had to pay for anyway and made it cash flow. Like, it's really fantastic.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, and even now, right? Like, even if you're in a position where you're like, oh, there's no way I could house hack. I'm not 24 and single, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you can do like a luxury house hack too. That's where we're at now, is that we bought our dream home up here in Northern Idaho. We're on 10 acres, beautiful, no neighbors, right? And so it's very peaceful, yet we're 5 minutes from town. So it's like a pretty desirable place to be. And we bought this pretty big house. It's just me and my wife right now. We'll grow into it, as we start to have kids and stuff. But as of now, I've been in the basement of maybe a total of 10 times in the year and a half we've been living there, looking down at the basement. And so we started renting that out on Airbnb, and it's not making us this was not a financial investment decision. It was like, hey, I can make an extra $500,000 a month. That turns our $3,000 mortgage into $1,000 or $2,000 mortgage. Like, that's worth it. And then we get to share our home with people too, which I also personally like doing. But
So
yeah,
you're offsetting your
so
mortgage. It's not even necessarily cash flowing, but it's just offsetting your mortgage significantly.
yeah, it's not cash flowing, and that's not the point, right? Like, and that's kind of that's the whole point of house hacking, right? Like, this is why like, if I were to go back 6 years or 5 years and do my first house hack, and you would ask me why I'm doing this, I'm like, I'm doing this for my future wife and my future kids so that we can live in the place that we want to live and do the things that we want to do. And I can make my future wife happy, right? I didn't even know who my wife was at the time, or like, she was not in my life at all. And so, the fact that, 6 years later, I've been able to bless her with, the beautiful home of our dreams and the lifestyle of dreams that we're really liking. And we're still relatively young, right? Like, she's 28, I'm 30, we still got our whole lifetime ahead. And so, like, it's exciting to be able to do that now while we're young and not hit that when we're 60 and be like, okay, cool, we made it,
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask, some people don't really talk about this. Do you think like income is like important when you're trying to scale? Is that something that you really push towards, or you kind of just like, let me take it slow, house per year?
Um, income, that's a good question, man. I'll say, yeah, it is important. Um, are there ways around it? Of course. If you look in like the financial independence community, you'll see people that have retired, in 10 or 15 years off of a $30,000-$40,000 salary, right? In which but what essentially what you have to do is you have to be extremely frugal and, use points. If you're going to travel, you got to stay in cheap places, you got to watch what you eat. Like, it becomes it, and some people like doing that. They kind of think of that as a game. Like, it's like, how little can I spend each month? And that's kind of the game they play. Um, but if you can just make more, that would kind of solve all those problems. And then, of course, your top is unlimited with making more, but with you can only cut your spending so much. You can, and so I do think that making more will make it go faster, but it's not necessary.
That's what I was gonna say. It sounds like it would just kind of make you scale a little bit quicker than normal.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Well, speaking of not making much money, Chandler and I have quite a few friends here in Savannah that are in the U.S. military, and Marines and full-time Army guys. They are not making a significant amount of money. And we know multiple people with multiple properties, and they have used an advantage that they have that Craig, you and I and Chandler don't have, and that they have the VA loan. And these guys are buying 4 and 5 bedrooms homes with zero money down on their VA loan, and then they're renting them out by the bedroom, exactly the formula that you've laid out. And a lot of times they sleep on their own couch and they rent all 5 bedrooms. And these guys have more than one property, and they're Marines. They are making, I think, sub 30,000 a year. Maybe I'm a little underselling it, but these are not high earning individuals. They've just used every possible, thing that every tool in their tool chest, and I respect the hustle. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. No, I think so too. Yeah, I mean, if you're in the military, and again, like, you're probably used to maybe some fairly tough conditions. I once hosted this guy from the military. He's just a friend of a friend and needed a place to stay. And at the time, I just had like a 1-bedroom place. I was like, yeah, like, hey, or like, sleep on the couch. I like did it out for him, and gave him a blanket and a pillow and all that. And I get up, he's gone, and the blanket and the pillow are exactly how I left it. And he's just like, yeah, I just like, he's in, all there was like a little post-it that said thank you. And I was like, where did this guy sleep? And then I later found out he just slept on the floor with no pillow, no blanket. And I was like, man, this guy is like insane. I gave him a pillow and a blanket and a couch to sleep on. And so it's like, if you can like be like that guy, right? I mean, you could go sleep outside in your backyard, I mean, it's again, it's like, no, I didn't see in my life that I will, like, no one when they're going as a kid says, oh, I want to live behind a curtain, right? But again, it's just a year or two of sacrifice for just a lifetime of gain. So
Yeah, I kind of like what you said. Would you do it for a year to make 500 grand? I think a lot of people would say yes.
yeah.
It's really impressive what you've done. I have to say, it's amazing. I've heard you speak on Bigger Pockets many times, and it's just been such an honor to get to know you. You really, you thought outside the box. And that's really the name of the game, is just being willing to do what no one else is willing to do. And you've got a lot of real estate that a lot of people don't have because of it. So we've all had to sacrifice something in order to get ahead in life. You're not going to just fall over and have $500,000 worth of equity. You're going to have to either put in the work or put in the sacrifice. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. And like, that's kind of what makes it so sweet too, is like, I don't know, like it feels good to have worked really hard for something and to have it come to fruition. And I personally think that the things that I value the most in my life are the things that I work the hardest for. And so, you know, if that house were just to be given to me, I don't think I would be talking about it much today, because like it would have been given to me. I would feel maybe awkward even sharing that story if it was gifted to me. I didn't sleep behind that curtain for a year, you know? And so I think like, you know, and honestly, like, I swear, like when I was behind the curtain, I was like, this is a start to my story. Like, I know that this story is going to, like, people are going to laugh at this in a few years and maybe it'll inspire a few people. And like, but it's going to make me different. Like, how can I be different than every other person who's investing in real estate? And then that, again, part of the reason why I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast for the first time. Like, the first time I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, I had just that one house hack and I was renting my car out on Turo. And I was, you know, like walking and biking to work every day. And so like, I just had zero expenses. And I was talking to Josh Dorkin about what I was doing. And he's like, oh, we got to have you on the podcast. And I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. And that was the first podcast I'd ever been on, was the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast. Right. And so, yeah, like that's, and I don't think I've ever even shared that with anybody. I didn't even realize it was such a big deal. But then I'm like, oh, like people probably like to practice before going on podcasts, but I didn't even realize like that was a thing. You know, so yeah, sometimes you just have to kind of just like, you know, roll your sleeves up, just go do it and learn as you go. And that's why you start with a house hack, is because you really can't fail, because you're going to be paying somewhere to live anyway. You might pay a slightly bit more if you house hack, but that's like such a small risk compared to like some other venture you might do.
Yeah. And if you haven't listened to that podcast on Bigger Pockets with you on it, go listen to it. I think I listened to it a few years ago.
Do you know what
And
episode number that is, Craig?
what is it?
I think the first one I did with them was 252, and that was my OG one. Like, that was my first podcast I ever did. And then I was on there again 2 years later. I think it was episode 350, and that was like more about the book, but the book launch. So
Yeah, go listen to it. They're really good. I would have never thought that was your first podcast ever.
yeah. Well, I will say, and I told Julie about this, is I did Toastmasters for like 10 years. And so that is a really good public speaking club that makes it so you don't really get nervous when you public speak, and you can talk somewhat eloquently with people, and it sounds pretty normal. So I would recommend checking out Toastmasters if you want to get better at public speaking.
Yeah, I need to check
Julie, have
that
you
out.
been yet?
No.
I knew it.
I
I wanted to give you some live accountability.
I know Craig's busting my chops on my podcast. Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta go. I even have a guy that said he would go with me because he needs to go too. He works with one of the trolley companies. I know I gotta do it. I've done a good bit of
It's really
public
fun.
speaking, but I need to do more.
Yeah, there's a lot of clubs, you gotta find the right one. Sometimes they're a bunch of old people, sometimes it's a bunch of young people. I personally prefer the ones with young people, but do whatever suits your fancy.
I'm terrible at public speaking. What are some what are some tips for public speaking?
Dude, you just gotta do it, bro. There's no tips. Like, yeah, the more you do it, the less nervous you get. You realize that no one really cares. No one's gonna really remember you, unless you say something insanely stupid, but you won't. And yeah, you just learn how to. They help you with your ums and ahs and likes, and I'm not perfect at that. That's for sure. I could be better. I haven't been in a couple of years. And they teach you how to, how do you use like metaphors to speak better, and voice intonation, and like all this stuff that you don't really think about when speaking. That is actually huge. And I don't do it as much. I don't think about it as much as I should, but like when I'm on stage or like in a job interview, it helped. I landed so many job interviews because I feel like I could just talk without being nervous. And I think that's just a huge part of it. It's just the reps. They give you the reps. That's really the biggest thing.
Oh yeah. I remember I had public speaking in college, and man, that class tore me up. My professor
Yeah.
he would sit me down and be like, "Dude, what's going on up there?" And I'm like, "I can't public speak right now. You got to teach me."
I don't know if this stat is true, but I have heard that people are more afraid of public speaking than they are of dying.
Really?
I mean,
I've heard it. I can't verify it, but I've heard it.
I
See,
don't
I
think
grew up in church and I was always up front having to do something. So to me, it's never been a huge ordeal. Not that I'm a pro by any means, but I never had this major fear about it. Now I had to speak on a hotel in on a just in June or so. I had to speak about investing in hotels, and I was very nervous because of all the topics I feel that I'm very competent at. That's the one that I'm still really in my learning curve. And I have to say that scared me just because I felt so incompetent in the subject matter. But getting up front
Yeah,
is, but yeah, it's important. You're gonna
totally.
have to, in real estate, you're always you're gonna have tenants that you want to speak to, maybe different professionals, someone to work on the house. Like you've got to feel comfortable selling what you've got and what you're doing and getting people on board with you. I'm sure you had to do that quite a bit with your house hacking, where it's like you have to explain what you're doing and get the person to help you do it. There's no way you did it all by yourself.
Totally. Well, and you think about it too, it's like how many opportunities are you saying no to because you're afraid of public speaking? It's like, you get asked to be on stage at a conference, or you don't want to because you're afraid, or you don't want to be on a podcast because you're nervous about how you might come off. It's like there's so many different opportunities that you would be able to have if you could just public speak and not be afraid of it. And so, yeah, I mean, you could probably leave in a lot of probably millions of dollars on the table. And heck, maybe even like I met my wife through a podcast. Like she heard me on the podcast and she reached out to me. And so that's how we initially met. And so if I was too afraid to public speak, I wouldn't have met my wife.
Wow.
And so, it's much more than just money, right? There's just so many opportunities out there that you don't know what you're missing.
Chandler throws baseballs 100 miles an hour or more, and that's how he gets the ladies. He doesn't need to talk. He
Uh,
just like,
well, he just
yeah, no, I would never
just
get. I
don't
mean, I get nervous in front of
just don't
thousands.
throw them at them.
Yeah, you're right.
Could you pitch in front of thousands of people?
Yeah, I would. And I mean, obviously, I would get nervous, but as soon as you throw that first one, it kind of goes away. But public speaking, it just never goes away. It's just always there. So, anyways, but like
Maybe
you
you should
said,
start. Maybe you should start singing the national anthem at your games
oh,
and see how that goes.
I would
yeah.
show up for that.
Oh man.
Well, speaking of teams, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chandler.
No, go ahead. I
I
was
was
going to
gonna,
turn.
I was gonna ask, what kind of a team does it take to do house hacking? What
What kind of team?
like you buy the house and then you got to get it ready and rented. Like, is there a management team? Is there what kind of people do you need to help you do that? Like, let's say you have.
So that's another thing that people like really like. That's analysis paralysis. Is they're like, oh, they said they got to build their team. It's like you don't really. You just need a realtor, an
Okay.
investor friendly real estate agent. There's one on this call that might be decently well, Julie. And so. And then once you find that investor friendly realtor, they'll likely have anybody else, right? And so the realtors tend to be the people that are the biggest networkers, and so they'll probably have contractors for you. If you need property management, they'd likely have a property management company that they work with, and like an accountant and a lawyer. Like you just ask people in the community, and you'll find that pretty easily. Like the team is not hard to find. You just have to get the one good investor friendly real estate agent, and then you'll be able to get introduced to everybody else.
Have you ever done your own rent collection with the rent by the room, or do you always pass that off onto someone else, or how do you typically do rent collection, especially with you living there?
Yeah, so when I was doing it, I used to do it just through this thing called Cozy, which is now apartments.com. These days I would use Rent Ready to just basically create like 5 separate units within the house and then set them up on there, do the background check. Everything can be done through Rent Ready. And so that would be my software of choice, but there's a bunch out there that are pretty good.
Rent Ready collects the payments too, right? Is that how you
Yeah,
collect
they
it?
collect payments. Yep, I collected payments through Cozy at the time, but yeah, Rent Ready would be what I'd use now. Yeah, they do everything.
So you mentioned agent. I kind of want to touch up on agent stuff. You're an agent. Um, what are some things that you do to kind of separate yourself from other agents? And I know you have a pretty big team too.
Right.
How do you get?
Yes. Yeah, so we pretty much started being an investor friendly real estate agent. So I started being an investor friendly real estate agent, and at the time it was not that popular of a thing to do. There were a couple out there, but not as big as it is today. And then I was like, there's definitely a need here, and I did like 100 deals my first year because I was like one of the only investor friendly agents in Denver. And so then I was like, okay, I either need to quit or start a team because like I can't do 100 deals a year. It's just nuts. And so I decided to start a team. And now we've got a team of investor friendly agents. Over the last few years, we've done probably 400 or so deals. I don't think there's anything we haven't seen yet when it comes to a house hack. So that's one way we separate ourselves, but also we're your coach, guide, and mentors through the whole thing. And so, we've got all the resources you need. We'll kind of hold your hands. We've had people literally like, my clients now that bought first in 2019 or 2020 are now on their third, fourth properties, and they're basically financially independent, and so it's cool to be able to kind of see them through that whole thing.
That's really great.
I was at the VP Con this past year. Julie was as well, and I sat in one of your sessions where you talked about
Hmm.
agents. You talked about kind of the boot camp you took them through, and I thought that was super
Oh,
interesting.
yeah. Do you want me to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, touch up on that a little bit and kind of what you take them through.
Yeah, so we have this boot camp, which is basically just a bunch of recorded videos and worksheets and kind of tasks that each new agent that comes on board does. Some of it is like, just getting assimilated to the FI team. Some of it is how to actually make money as a real estate agent, because they definitely didn't learn that in their licensing class. And some of it is just like, how do you structure your day? How do you structure your bank accounts? All that, just like how to be an agent and how to make money doing so. And so it's basically like, we like to see people get through that in a month or less. And it's kind of a litmus test for us, right? Like if they can get through in a month or less, I know that they're serious and they're ready to go, and I can pour into them. If it takes them 5-6 months, like, it doesn't really cost us that much to have an agent on the team. And so, we'll have them on the team, but I'm just not going to pour into them. I'm not going to do anything for them. Like it's just going to be just whatever, right? And so yeah, so not only does it kind of train them up into what we're doing, but it gives us a litmus test for how they're going to perform.
Smart. Well, and Craig, I've talked to other, clients, because obviously I'm an investor. I've been an investor way longer than I've been an agent. And I've talked to clients that they'll come work with me. I'm sure you've heard this as well. And they say, gosh, I've asked agents to lowball on a house because for us, the purchase price is so crucial, and I always try to get my buyer the best deal. And they said most retail agents don't want to lowball. They think that their reputation is at stake, or, they are afraid of being told no. Have you heard some stories like that in your market as well? Because I hear it almost every day. They're amazed that I'll be like, yeah, we'll take 50 grand off and go, let's see what happens. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I think it depends kind of on how competitive the market is. And so what I always do is I like before putting in an offer, and what we tell all of our agents to do is we're going to call the listing agent and get a feel for how many offers are there, how much interest is there, do they got any offers in hand, what are those offers, etc. And if we're the only offer and we want to get this thing accepted, then yeah, we'll come in a little under. But if there's other offers on the table,
Yeah.
it's senseless for us to low ball, right? It's like we're not going to get it. And if you can't come up, then let's just keep looking, right? And so yeah, I mean, I'm never one to like force anybody's hand up or down. I just kind of give them my recommendation, and I'll say like I like to use percentages a lot. And so I'll say, let's say the house is listed at 480 and there's tons of buyers and there's got like 5 or 6 offers. And I'll say, hey, look, like we could probably come in at like 510 and we've got like probably a 50 or 60% chance of winning. Like, do you like those odds? And if they don't, if they're okay, if they want to offer 500, I'll say, okay, like it's probably like more of a 30 or 40% chance. Does that sound better? And so I'll kind of use, and the numbers are fairly arbitrary, right? But I just it's kind of a feel, right? Just based on my experience in the market and all that. And I'll just kind of feel like, hey, like if you guys, based on the percentages, like what do you want to offer? And I kind of let them really decide the offer versus me just being like, you got to come in at this price.
So as an agent, what have you found the most success with? Is it being the first offer in? Um, like what do you have you found the most success?
I think being the first offer in actually might hurt you a little bit because then now they're basing every offer off of yours. And so if I am the first offer in, I always make sure just to kind of keep in touch. Um, I'd say keeping in touch, and also asking like what the seller's looking for and making sure you adhere to the seller's needs. And so if it's just price, like, okay, cool. But if sometimes they need like a post occupancy agreement, sometimes, they want a lighter and, being light on the inspection items, uh, offering appraisal coverage. Those are all ways that we can kind of sweeten the deal that doesn't necessarily affect the price. And so, yeah, those are some things um, that we'll do.
I want to second what
Okay.
you just said. I made a big purchase in 2020 and it was a block of properties, and I hunted down the agent and I said, and there was a ton of interest, just like what you're saying. And I said, what do they want as far as price? And she flat out told me. So I nailed the price with zero contingencies. And it was just, there was just no way they weren't going to take my price because I didn't inspect. I didn't have any appraisal condition. I just removed every barrier, and I also handed them the price, and I got exactly what I wanted, which was that block of properties. And the price was decent. I'm not saying it was like an astronomical price, but they had many other offers that they turned down. And I just was, so if it's a competitive market, you really have to give on terms. That's for sure. I've seen that over and over. We had one, licensed short-term rentals here in Savannah are very competitive. And we had this couple trying to get one, but they were offering a high price, but then they wanted 15,000 in seller concessions just from the initial offer. And,
Yeah.
we were just like, anyway, the sellers are smarter than that. If it's a competitive thing, I agree. You're going to have to come up with that and not have so many rough terms.
Yeah, but I will say, like, I don't know, I get a little bit agitated if a buyer keeps just like, oh, it's low ball, it's low ball, it's low ball. I'm just like, you're missing the point, right? Because like I've actually done this analysis and done the Excel spreadsheet of like what happens if you buy one deal a year every year for 5 years and you don't get a good deal. It's exactly at asking price. Maybe even you pay $10,000 or $20,000 more, but you get the deal. Versus if you get a banging deal, like let's say 20% off the retail price every 18 months, right? So instead of once a year, it's every 18 months. So it's going to take you about 6 months longer to find this deal. Your difference in net worth after about 6 years is $1 million. And so it's like, like cool, like, okay, go like swindle the sellers all you want. Like I'm going to buy a house every year and make sure it's on the year. Cause it's, what people miss is the point of, 6 months doesn't sound like a long time in the first one, but after the second one, that becomes 12 months, and then it becomes 18 months, and then it becomes 2 years when you could have bought two more houses, all of which are going to appreciate at that same rate, all of which are going to add to your cash flow bottom line. And so, I wouldn't worry too much about like the intricacies of the numbers and saving 20 grand than just being able to buy that house every single year.
It's so good. I've never thought about it like that.
It's great advice. It's
Yeah.
really great.
So Craig, I want to ask, like, what's next for you? Are you still just kind of you want to buy huge apartment complexes? Like, what's next?
Yeah, no, I don't want to do that actually. I want to continue to grow the FI team. I think we're going to add some ancillary businesses like some property management, potentially lending, insurance, and stuff like that. Kind of make that a whole thing. And then from my own personal investment side, like I think I'm done, honestly. Like, I
Wow.
talked with my wife and we're just like, what does adding more properties look like? What does adding scaling up and going commercial look like? And it looks like more work and more stress for me. And it's like, and if we just paid off all the properties we've got now, we'd probably have about double the passive income that we spend, which is where I like to be. And so I think we're just going to work on paying our properties off. And at that point in time, we'll have a very nice baseline. And with our extra, hopefully the extra that we're saving, maybe I'll do an LP, maybe I'll buy a house a year, but I'm not looking to become a billionaire, and I don't care for that. Like we've got the house that we want. We're here, we got the lifestyle that we want. And so yeah, I don't need any of the fancy toys or anything like that. So
I want to ask, you're speaking at BPCon this year.
yeah.
Can you give a little inside look of what you'll be speaking about?
Yeah, so I've got I'm on 3 panels. I'm on the house hacking panel, the investor friendly real estate agent panel, and a finding deals panel. Um, and funny thing is like I didn't even realize I was on 3 panels until someone else told me. Uh, and I thought they had made a mistake about me being on the finding deals panel. But I think they were just looking for someone like who can find deals on the MLS. Because like again, most of my deals are MLS, but like I can see deals on the MLS that other people don't see. And so I'm kind of coming at it from that perspective to still add value.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Chandler and I will be there. We will buy you a beer or something when we're there, hopefully.
Woo! You are going, Julie. For some reason,
But
why do I think you say you may not? Okay. I think you were thinking about it before, weren't you? Yeah.
we actually bought our tickets for this year, last year at BBCon. So I
Oh, okay.
had some frustrations with the speaker lineup, and I have expressed those to you,
That's
but
good.
I am going.
Yeah.
It's in Orlando for those of you nearby, which if you're in Savannah, you have no excuse not to go because it's only a 4-hour drive. So we're definitely going to see you there. And I just, your story is amazing. I just cannot even give you enough props for what you've done in life. And I love how focused you are on having a life and not killing yourself over 3 more deals. Like, I really respect that. I need to take a page out of that book.
Yeah, no, it's something that I saw myself going down that path, and I think a lot of it is the kind of like that comparison game, right? Of like you like I don't know, I was in it for a couple years ago, and I've been trying to work myself out of it, and it's like I don't really care what anybody else thinks. Like all I care about is making like my wife happy and me happy, and when I look at that, it's like, well, we're kind of there, and now it's like now we just free up our time, and then something else happens, right? But yeah, so
I mean, that should be the ultimate goal is, I mean, be happy. I mean, if you're not happy, then
Right.
something's wrong.
yeah, you know what they say, more money, more problems, right? So you have slightly less money, you'll maybe have slightly less problems.
That's it.
But yeah, I mean, have enough to get like I think like I don't this is what feels good for me, right? And my story could be different. Like if your goal is to become a billionaire, like I've got nothing against you. Like I've got friends who've got that goal, and I'm rooting for them, right? I want them to get there quick, right? Like, but I just looked at what it takes to get there, and I just decided for myself that it's not worth it because I don't know how that would bring more happiness to me and my family. So
Well, Craig, I don't want to take up all your time. We appreciate you coming on and spending an hour with us. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you,
for
Craig.
sure, yeah, it's been a blast being here, and yeah, always happy to come on and chat. So
We'll see you in a couple months.
see ya. Looking forward to it.
We appreciate Greg Curlop coming on today. It was a really good podcast. I enjoyed asking him. I think I hogged the entire podcast. Sorry about that, Julie.
Oh, it was great.
I had too many questions to ask him, but please like, comment, subscribe, share with all your friends. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.